Underdog Collectibles is an online shop run for collectors by collectors. Join them every Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday night as they break new products, talk sports, and hopefully you'll pull a great hit to add to your collection. Visit them at www.udogcollect.com and tell them WaxPackHero sent you. Remember, always bet on the underdog. You're listening to the WaxPackHero Sports Card Minute, a podcast where we discuss both the hobby and business sides of collecting. I'm your host, Mike Sommer, and I want to help you buy, sell, and trade your way into a collection you'll love. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the 2021 edition of the WaxPackHero Sports Card Minute. I'm recording this on Saturday morning, January 2nd, and I've been thinking a lot about where I want to go with cards in 2021. From a card perspective, 2020 was great. I hope it gets even better in 2021. And I was just spending some time filing my sales tax return for the last 3 months of 2020, looking ahead at what I've got going on an eBay perspective, what I've got going on from a podcast perspective. And we're going to talk about some goals next week. So a little teaser, we're going to talk about goals next week. We're going to have working on some more interview guests. We're going to be doing an episode, doing a financial recap like I did in the early part of 2020, just to give you guys a picture of what is possible for somebody doing this part-time and give you a feel for what revenue comes in, what expenses go out, and give you an idea of what things might look like for you if you ever tried to do this. So those are a couple teasers of things that we've got going on in upcoming episodes. But today's episode is an update from StarStock. StarStock was a sponsor of the show as they were getting ready to launch early in 2020, and they sponsored the show for several months throughout 2020 as they got up and going. But a lot had changed since they launched, and so I thought it was time to get somebody from StarStock to come back, provide an update on how things are going, what they've got going on, how the site is developing, and what they might have coming up into the near future. And so Scott Greenberg, the co-founder and CEO, is joining me for a conversation. So I don't want to waste any time, and I'll just go ahead and run the interview. Well, for many listeners of the show, they will not be strangers to StarStock. StarStock had been a sponsor of the show since the beginning of StarStock's run as a site. And now we had Nigel Eccles on the show early on, pre-launch. And today we bring Scott Greenberg on the show, who is one of the co-founders and the CEO of StarStock. And we're going to talk a little bit about the site and its progression and where they're headed. So Scott, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
No problem. Well, we had Nigel on the show back in March, I believe it was, but we have not yet had a chance to talk with you. So how about you just share a little bit about your hobby background to get us started?
Yeah, absolutely. My background in the hobby, I grew up a pretty big collector, liked chasing basketball cards for the most part, but Yankee players as well. My favorite players, Carmelo Anthony growing up. So I have a pretty good collection of some of his stuff. I think like a lot of other people, I stepped aside from the hobby when I got to middle school or high school and brought my cards up into the attic. And then about 2 years ago, I got really into it again. And so for me, I came back in kind of from an angle of someone who's a really big college sports fan, specifically basketball. And I saw it as a good way for me to prospect young athletes and try to make a few extra dollars on some of my sports knowledge. And so I'm a big fantasy football player as well as a sports bettor. And this was kind of another frontier where I thought that I can put my sports knowledge to make some money and to have some fun while I'm watching games. And so I got back in 2 years ago as more of like an investor, but shortly after, just started collecting cards again. And so most of my collection's in golf now, but I do have a pretty good basketball collection as well.
Well, I've been a buyer and a seller on the site since its launch, and actually pre-launch. I had some of the initial cards that were up on the site as it went live in beta. And so I thought it would be it would be fun to spend a few minutes talking about the progression of the site, how it's evolved since launch. One of the things that I've appreciated most about the approach that you guys have taken is that you are not afraid to iterate. And it seemed like for those first couple months, every few days, there was a new feature or a new button or a new filter or some other modification or tweak to the site to make it more user-friendly. So talk to me a little bit about the progression of the site from launch until what we see today.
Yeah, so I feel like we've made a lot of progress. We've been out there for a little over 6 months now. The vision has remained the same since day one. Really, what we saw as our opportunity was to build a marketplace that basically takes some of the friction out of buying and selling cards and just makes it a little bit easier. And so, this was something I noticed when I was getting back in to the hobby, and my partners as well, because they have a pretty similar story. And so what we really focused on doing was making it easier and less expensive to sell cards. And that's kind of always been the vision and remains the vision to this day. And then on the marketplace side of things, on the buy side, the goal was really to make it very easy to come to our site and find the card that you're looking for and do your research all in one location and make that purchase. And so the site that we launched with certainly reflected that. But I feel like over these past few months or so, we've definitely been able to make some enhancements that has kind of made it even easier and taken out even more friction as we've been moving along.
So one of the things that sets you guys apart is your limited focus. So rookie cards only from a handful of sets from a few of the most popular sports at this time. Yes. And I understand that that's intentional and that is a business decision, but it also somewhat limits the number of available cards on the site and limits to some extent the number of people who would be attracted to StarStock as a marketplace because they may not have some of those other cards that they're looking for. And so, like I said, I understand that's an intentional business decision and part of your strategy. How do you look at the pros and the cons of that strategy?
Yeah, so the con is that we don't accept everything, and so people that want to sell off their collection or sell their cards, and if they have some modern that they like sending to us, but they also have vintage, we don't accept that, and so the con is I guess they have to split their collection between two different sites. For us, it's pretty simple. Like as I said, our goal is to really build out a stock market like website where people can buy cards instantly and at scale and do it at a more affordable price. And so in order for this model to work, we have to be very specific with the cards that we take. And, we only accept a few sets for each sport. And the reason why is we want the product to be simple. We want to enable people to come to our site and only need to choose between 3 or 4 brands of Zion Williamsons instead of the 28 brands that Panini might produce. And the second reason is we only accept cards that we can really make money on. And so we do have a unique model. We charge a 5% seller fee, which is about 1/3 of some of the other more traditional markets out there. And the way that we make that work is by having cards that are selling frequently. And, we really only want to accept cards that we can make money on because at the end of the day, we are a business.
You talked about selling frequently. I was curious on that breakdown of the people who buy and relist immediately and like continue that cycle directly on the site versus people who buy a card and have it shipped home. What's that breakdown look like?
Most people keep their cards on the site. What we really specialize in, where we have the most liquidity, is base cards. In basketball and football, it's Prism, Optic Select, Donruss. And for baseball, it's Top Series 1, 2, Update, Bowman Chrome. And so for the most part, with the types of cards that we carry, people like keeping them in the vault because they want to make sure that they can flip that card at the most optimal time. And so you can take a good example from this week of Talon Horton Tucker, who's the talk of the hobby right now. For those that don't know the story, basically, he has a great game. LeBron tweets about him. His card goes from 50 cents to about like $12, $13. Next day, he drops 33 points, and the card goes all the way up to $17. but it only stayed at $17 for a few hours, and then it dropped all the way back down to 12. And so if you didn't have your cards in the vault and you saw that opportunity, this might have been the last opportunity to sell Talon Horton Tucker that high. Who knows? Maybe he's a great player, maybe he's not. But the idea is that if you have the cards in the vault and you're watching the game, and you're at the bar, you're at a friend's house, wherever you are, you can go on your phone and you can list that card for sale immediately. You don't need to take pictures. You don't need to then go and send it in. And so that's really the idea. And that's why people like keeping their cards in the vault.
And from a business perspective, that's better for you as well, right? That's less handling, less back and forth, on and off, less processing. You're generating that commission on each of those subsequent flips. And so that's probably better for you as well to not have as many cards processed and sent home versus relisted and kept in the vault. At the beginning of the football season, there was a lot of discussion about how you envision collectors and investors buying and flipping in game as something that would add to the enjoyment of watching sports. What are the transaction levels for players in the middle of a game compared to the regular transaction levels? Is that theory playing out? Do you see more in-game flips and in-game transactions as you thought you might?
Totally. And if it's not in game, it's in news, right? So it's a Woj tweet or a big free agency pickup in baseball. The people that we see sell the most frequently are the ones that are in the news. And typically we see the sales happen around that time. And so with Talon Horton Tucker, to stay with that example, we were selling a lot of cards right after LeBron's tweet or during his game while he was, scoring when he scored 33 points. Another good example is when Joe Burrow got injured, you had about 60 seconds to get to Ryan Finley, who was their backup quarterback. And if you didn't get to him within a minute, all of those cards were already scooped up and relisted. And so there's definitely a big component to live trading. And personally, as a consumer myself, that was something that I was always looking for. And personally, that's kind of what we think one of the gaps in fantasy football is that you can't make any adjustments to your lineup during the game. But with StarStock, you can watch the game and you can actually interact and you can buy and sell players.
One of the big pros about selling on StarStock was no submission fees. And so if you had the cards that you were looking for, you could send them in and in a pretty quick time, get them listed with no submission fees. How are submission levels looking at this point? Have you been able to scale to the point where you're still able to keep up and keep kind of that 4 or 5 day turnaround that you were having for quite a while?
Yeah, I think our turnaround right now is about 1 to 3 weeks. We've created a system called FastPass, in which we upload all of these select amount of sets within 48 hours. Typically, those are 2020 sets. So right now, our FastPass includes Donruss Football 2020, Prism Football 2020, and NBA Draft Prism. And we'll include new sets as they come out. And then also graded cards get uploaded within 48 hours. And I don't know if you saw, but we actually just launched a wax vertical of sealed boxes. Those get uploaded within 48 hours as well.
And those are also something that you send in?
Exactly.
Right? So yep. You guys are storing those in the vault as well?
Exactly. Yes. And so we launched this last week, maybe a week ago today. It was Thursday or Wednesday. And we've gotten hundreds of boxes since they started coming in on Monday. And it's been fantastic. They're already starting to sell on the platform. We're really excited about it.
One of the other questions that I've gotten from people who are considering selling on the site is, one of those parameters is, like we talked about before, rookie cards only from a handful of sets, but they're also rookie cards and prospect cards of active players. So one of the questions that I've got is, what happens when a player is no longer active? 3 or 4 or 5 years from now, when we start to see some of these people out of the league, what happens at that point to the way that you're managing that inventory?
Yeah, well, you could go look up Vince Carter. We have a couple of his cards on the site. And then we have a few funny exceptions where I think we have some Johnny Manziels and some Andrew Lucks, and I think a few Colin Kaepernicks too. But it's a good question. To be honest, We've thought about it a little bit, not too much. I do think in the near future, we might, start accepting some vintage cards. Obviously, in 2 to 3 years, LeBron will probably be out of the league, and Carmelo and maybe Chris Paul, a lot of people. And so we have a few ideas on how we can kind of graduate them into a different section of the marketplace, or maybe we start accepting Hall of Fame vintage players only. And so we're looking into different ideas on how to handle that process. But as of now, they're still in there. You can go buy a Vince Carter if you want.
Yeah. So what you just hit on was actually leads into one of the other questions that I have. One of those things that I think about as I'm thinking about the focus on rookie and prospect cards of current active players is many of them are going to be unproven and have very short track records. From an investment perspective, from a long range perspective, a lot of those Hall of Famers, like you mentioned, and their rookie cards have more limited downside, right? It's a slightly different investment class risk profile than the ones we have now. And so as I've thought about this, and other people have asked me about using sports cards as an investment, it sometimes seems like we're in this midst of a peak, or we're in the midst of a run up over the last several years. And if we're only focusing on rookies and prospects of brand new, unproven people, there's that potential that we're buying the most risky type of sports card at the time.
No question about it.
Yeah. Any thoughts? You touched on that fact that maybe we might open it up to Hall of Fame rookie cards in the future. Have you any other thoughts or considerations on how you try to educate collectors on the pros and cons or the risks that they need to be considering when they're focusing solely on current modern rookies and prospects?
Yeah. And so obviously the newer they are to the league, the riskier they are. There's the most upside as well. I think buying a LeBron James rookie card is one of the safest investments you can make, not only in sports cards, just in general. Like, I think it's an unbelievable investment. And vintage cards are great investments as well. The reason why we didn't launch with them is because they're not as interesting and there's not as much price movement. And what we're trying to build is a marketplace with a lot of velocity and a lot of movement. And the vintage cards just don't have that. Even LeBron, take LeBron, for example, he could score 50 points for maybe a whole entire month in a row, and it probably wouldn't move his card because it's already built in that he's, one of the GOATs of basketball. Whereas a guy like Talon Horton Tucker, or a guy like Bol Bol, or Michael Porter Jr., or Ja, or Zion, they haven't proven themselves yet. And so obviously they're riskier, but they're more volatile and they're more fun. And there's a lot of people that are coming into this hobby that love prospecting young athletes. And it's almost like taking a future bet on a player. And so I think that, there's definitely different types of people that are in this hobby, different types of collectors. I personally love collecting cards. I have a huge golf collection and a basketball one as well. But I use the flipping aspect, and I use StarStock as like a game, just like I play fantasy football or I play DFS on FanDuel or DraftKings. That's kind of how I see StarStock. And I take my profits on StarStock to go buy that Tiger Woods card that I want, or to go buy that Mellow that I've been looking to buy for the past few months. And so that's kind of how I look at it, is that it, we're trying to gamify and really make like a fun platform where you can play on a daily basis.
Yeah. And I think, you added a little bit to that with the football invitational and now the basketball invitational. And I think if anything, that the football invitational to some extent highlights the fact that not everything is going to be going up in perpetuity up and to the right long term, right? With the results that some of the contestants in that have shown, is that depending on what you buy and when you buy it can make a big determination on whether you will be profitable or not from that investing or flipping mindset. But I think those are those are an interesting combination of both that investing, money making angle, as well as the fantasy football game contest type angle that some people have with using cards for that type of entertainment as well. Where did that idea come from?
Oh, that's a good. I think that they did something similar at FanDuel, and we were talking about how it'd be cool to do something similar to that. And so then we just tried to figure out a system that would work, and that would be fun and engaging. And I think we have a lot of work still to do on this, and the first couple have been kind of like test runs in a way, and we've been learning a lot. So we've made a few adjustments for this upcoming one. I think it's going to be really fun. So we have 12 people. For those that don't know, we have 12 people. 10 of them are, sports cards or just general sports influencers. And 2 are wild cards that we give away on Instagram and Twitter. And so we give them all $500 and we track their progress throughout the season. One thing we're doing this year is when we get to the All-Star game, which I think is 10 weeks into the season, we are going to eliminate the last place contestant. And every single week, every Sunday, we're going to start eliminating the last place contestant until we get down to 2 people. And so that, along with a few other kind of tricks that we have up our sleeve, we think might make it a little bit more fun, a little bit more competitive this time around.
Another feature of the site that you guys have been sharing for the last several months that definitely also has more of that investment mutual fund type influence is the Emerging 30. Can you talk to me a little bit about the Emerging 30, how those 30 players were chosen? Will they change over time? Kind of how does that index work?
Yeah. So this, I can tell you exactly how we came up with the idea for this. Nigel and I were just writing out the top 30 players in the 2017, 18, and 19 draft class in the NBA on a whiteboard. And we put their Prism StarStock A price on it. Did this a few months ago. We were trying to figure out which players we thought were undervalued. And so what we found was when we put their price on the whiteboard, it was really easy to go up and circle players and be like, wow, if that guy's going for that, then this guy should not be going for that, or he should be more, or he should be less. And so we put that on the whiteboard. We're like, wow, this is great. We got to figure out a way to get this on the site. And so what we've done is we've taken the 30 best prospects from 2017 through 2020. We found our first 30 by Prism StarStock A price. So it's the top 30 StarStock A prices for those draft classes. And what's really cool about it is you can use it as a tool to measure just like the overall performance of the basketball market. But it's also cool to click into the chart. And since it's the same exact asset, same exact card and grade for every player, we basically strip out the card. And all you need to really look at are the names and the prices next to them. And if you know that Donovan Mitchell's going for $100 and John Morant's going for $150, you think Donovan Mitchell's better than John Morant, then sounds like you should probably buy a Donovan Mitchell card. And so, yeah, we're really excited about this. We've gotten a great response from it so far. We'll definitely do more things like these in the future.
So those 30 are essentially frozen for the purpose of this group. It's not like you're going to be swapping people out or anything like that for this initial Emerging 30.
No, we're actually going to start a relegation process. I haven't told anyone this yet. We'll probably start in the next, if not this Sunday, then the following Sunday. We will recorrect the top 30 every month. So every 4 weeks, if someone drops out and is not a top 30 priced StarStock A Prism card anymore, they will drop out of the index and new guys will emerge and come in.
So then at that point, it will no longer kind of reflect the people who are falling off, kind of that downside of people who are falling out of favor. It's going to be removing them. And is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like hypothetically, if someone who was in the 28th spot tore their ACL and, went to a third of the value, and then on the flip side, Talon Horton Tucker keeps on putting up incredible games, and now he's, going for $30, he'll move into the index, and whoever drops out, whoever's prices falls all the way down will drop out. So We'll take the top 30 every month.
So at that point, it becomes more of a tool to help identify potential people that you want to jump on, not necessarily a true reflection of the movement of the market
It will both. I mean, like they do the same thing in the stock market. They'll recorrect their indexes, to account for new companies that should be in the S&P and some companies that should fall out. And so it should reflect the overall market, especially because the market is moved mostly by the top 15 to 20 players on the index, and the bottom 10 represent a lot smaller share of the market in the index.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I thought that was an interesting angle or an interesting perspective that we haven't really seen too often yet in the sports card world. And so I wanted to ask a little bit about that. What are some of the upcoming additional features and initiatives that you're planning on rolling out over the next several months? You talked about the rollout of wax, of sealed boxes on the site. Mm-hmm. What are some of the other things that we might be able to expect to see in the coming months?
Yeah. So the past 3 or 4 weeks have been pretty big in terms of features we put out. We launched the index. Shortly after that, we launched the wax. And about 2 weeks ago, we launched PSA submissions. And so this is something that we've been getting support emails and DMs on social for as soon as we launched, we started getting them. And so we're really, really excited about this. We capped our first submission at 1,200 cards and we sold out in 24 hours. And so there's a lot of demand for people to get their cards graded from the StarStock vault over to PSA and then right back into the vault. And so that's something that we just launched that we're excited about, and it's going to be a big initiative for us in 2021. Another feature that we just launched, I think it was last week, was upcoming game schedules on the site. And so we now have a widget where you can see the upcoming game schedules for NFL, MLB, or NBA, and then see like the top 5 players that are going to be participating in that game. And you can click on the player, it will take you to their card. And so I think in January and February, you'll see a lot of building on top of that. We'd like to integrate stats, injury news, things like that. So you can do a lot more research on our site. And so that's something we're excited about. And then a lot of work to the collection. I think personally, if you ask me what part of the site I'd like to see kind of improve in these next few months, I think that we can, add a lot into the collection to make it, easier to list cards, as well as just showing you more data to analyze how you're doing, how you're performing.
Yeah, that would be great. I think for me, one of those things that I recommended for improvement was reducing the number of clicks that it took to buy a card and relist. At first it was several. I think we're down to maybe 2 or 3 clicks now to get that taken care of. But some of those types of things would be super helpful in reducing that additional friction. So it's good to see that user experience is continuing to be on the forefront. You added soccer recently. Any thoughts on adding any additional sports?
Yeah, we'd love to. Kind of our mentality here with product enhancements, as well as adding sports and features and things like that, is we truly listen to what people tell us to do. And the reason why we added soccer was because we were getting so many DMs and so many emails from people telling us that we needed to add soccer, that it got to a point we just couldn't stop. We couldn't respond to them anymore and tell them, that we're thinking about it or that we want to do it. And so we just did it. And so I've had a few people that have asked about hockey. We don't get it too frequently, and some other sports as well. And so with feature updates and adding new sports, as soon as we hear it from our customers that they want it, then it will move up to the top of our to-do list. And, our product team looks at all the feedback that comes in, and that's basically how we choose our priority of what to work on next.
You've been running for 5 or 6 months now. What has been one of the biggest unexpected challenges to getting the site off the ground and running and processing all of these cards that people are submitting? What are some of the biggest challenges that you guys have had to overcome that you maybe weren't expecting to be as big of a deal as they were?
Well, we didn't expect to get so many cards so fast back in May. And so obviously we knew that building out a process to first safely, process these cards, but also do it at a good speed. We knew that was going to be tough. We didn't know that we were going to get so many cards so quickly right out of the gate. And so we basically had to take a lot of our engineering efforts into building us tools to help us scale that up. And we had to hire a lot of people. And that was definitely a big challenge. Doing that while also figuring out what's the best way to store the cards, and what's the best way to process the cards and take photos and all that stuff. And so really proud of how we've been able to build out that process over the first few months or so. That was definitely a big challenge. Another challenge is kind of in a different category, was just like the challenge of getting the football market going. Like, I personally thought the NFL market was going to resemble the NBA market at least a little bit, and it just completely didn't. And so you touched on it with the SIFC competition, but that was something that I totally was not expecting, was for the basketball market to be that much more popular and that much bigger than football. And I don't think it was only our site. It's just in general in the hobby right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk this year with the number of new collectors, some of the people coming over from fantasy sports. There was a lot of talk at the beginning of the season how this might be the year that the traditional quarterback-driven football card market might shift to some of the other position players. And I just don't think we've seen that play out like some people thought it might.
No, didn't happen. It didn't happen. It doesn't mean it's not going to happen. I do think it still could happen. I think football players aren't, they don't have the brands that these NBA players have. They wear helmets and they're not as tied to pop culture. I also think Saquon Barkley and Christian McCaffrey getting injured in the first 2 weeks, those are picks number 1 and 2 in fantasy football. So that didn't help either. But I'm still bullish that, in the future, in the next couple years, this market will really be able to grab a lot of that fantasy market, a lot of those football fans.
Last question I've got for you comes from, I guess, recent events. It was just released over the last week or two that you guys received a big investment round funding, a little bit more from Nigel, who we've been talking about a little bit before, but also a couple other big name NBA players, Kevin Durant and Dellavedova. Tell me a little bit about that funding round and what some of the thoughts are on how those funds are going to be used to continue to grow and scale the site.
Yeah, no, we're really excited. We got an awesome team of investors on board with us, people that can really bring some value and kind of really guide us as we build this company up. And so we're really excited. Obviously, it's great to have athletes on the platform, especially we're trying to build such a athlete focused site, and so it definitely makes a lot of sense. I think you'll see that the money is going to go towards really enhancing this product and continuing to work on that and make it amazing, and hopefully add some cool features and stuff that people like, as well as really scaling up our operations. We want to get cards in faster. We want to ship out cards faster. We want to submit more cards to PSA. And we just want to continue to really make the buying and the selling process on our site as easy and frictionless as possible. And so that's going to remain our goal. And the new fundraising round is just going to, help us get there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Before we go, why don't you tell people where they can find you, the best social media to follow StarStock itself, and anything else that you want to make sure people take away from our conversation today?
Yeah, well, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at StarStock Market. Personally, I'm Scotty with a Y .Greenberg on Instagram and Twitter. And yeah, NBA season's kicking up. I know that there's a lot of your listeners that have probably tried StarStock and a lot that haven't. I just would love anyone who hasn't given it a shot yet to go check it out. If you have any feedback or if you have any questions, we have an amazing support team here that works really, really hard. And so give us a call, email us anytime. Love chatting with you guys. And that's about it. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, thanks again, Scott. I really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks again to Scott for coming on. It was great to hear how the site has progressed so far. As you can see, it's not necessarily going to be a site for everybody. It's not going to be a site if you're a big player collector and like to build a large variety of different different cards for your collection. That's not necessarily the site that you're going to go to buy. And the same thing as Scott said, if you're looking to unload your whole collection, it's not necessarily the only site that you'll be able to use to do that. But if you do have rookie cards from the sets that they're taking of these current players, it has been a fantastic site for me to use to sell and flip those cards. No submission fees, only a 5% sales fee at the commission at the time of sale. And it's been a very successful site if you happen to have the cards that they're looking for on the site. And so I would recommend that you check it out. It'll be interesting to see how some of the other things play out, the investment focus, the flip focus, the top 30 index, some of those types of angles that they're taking to try to continue connecting the concept of investing to cards. I don't know how that will play out in the long run. I still think there's a lot of risk of focusing on rookie cards of unproven players as your sole focus, but we'll see how it plays out. Anyway, thanks again to Scott for coming on. Thank you again for listening. I would love to hear your feedback on the show and on this episode. You can reach me at waxpackhero@gmail.com. You can reach out on Twitter at @TheMikeSummer. And as always, I would love for you to leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or your podcast app of choice so that other people can see more about the show, what you like, and what you would recommend as an area of improvement. Well, that is all I have for you today. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll catch you next time.